The last night in orbit, they said peace was a quiet thing. But no one told us how loud silence could be on the last night before everything changes. In the metal heart of a ship older than its captain, orbiting a planet untouched by war for centuries, Captain Sarah sat alone with her memories, wrapped in a silence that pressed tighter than armor ever did. The ship's systems hummed softly, like a lullaby she no longer trusted, and the stars outside blinked slowly, as if the universe itself held its breath. Her reflection in the viewport looked foreign now. Same face, same eyes, but carved by guilt, burned by commands given too easily. Her hands, once steady on the controls of fire and death, now trembled around a photograph she carried everywhere, her crew's first mission. Their hopeful eyes before the scream started. Somewhere in the ship's belly, mechanics still adjusted gears. Engineers checked stability, but all of them knew tomorrow wasn't about battle. It was about surrendering to something they didn't understand. A life without war. The command deck echoed with her footsteps as she walked the familiar path. Boots clicking over memories, metal floor panels hiding years of orders, losses and victories that tasted like ash. She paused near the tactical map that once glowed red with enemy markers now blank. Like a memory wiped clean, she stared at it, almost afraid to touch it, afraid it might remember. Outside, the planet rotated slowly below, shrouded in stormy clouds and golden sunlight peeking through beautiful, wild, untouched. Ilaria, they called it. The forgiven world, once ravaged, now reclaimed by time and nature. It wasn't just a landing. It was a reckoning. In her quarters, she took off the medals no one asked her to wear, laid them one by one on the table like confessions. Each one a story, each one a ghost. Her voice log blinked, waiting for a final entry. She ignored it. Some things didn't need to be said out loud. Instead, she opened the old maintenance hatch near her bed and pulled out a tiny packet, a single flower seed, smuggled through 1,000 checkpoints. Given to her by a refugee child who had no words, only hope. Plant this, the child had whispered. When you find peace. She held it in her palm as if it might vanish. Tomorrow she'd plant it in Ilaria's soil. That would be her first act. Not as a captain, but as a human trying again. The hours ticked on. Her crew gathered in the central bay. No speeches, just glances, tight nods. One mechanic cried quietly. No one said anything. They'd earned this silence. Sarah stepped into the lift and wrote it down. The door opened slowly. Her boots touched the landing deck. And for the first time in her life, the ground didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. As the ship's engines powered down for the first time in years, she looked out into the dawn rising over Ilaria. Soft light spread over the field. Her crew behind her, uncertain but standing, and Sarah, with that seed in her hand, whispered to herself, "Let this be the last night we carry war." When sky fell to earth, in the wide-open grasslands that kissed the edge of the southern ridge, a child named Oren stood barefoot in the morning dew, his face tilted to the heavens as something ancient stirred above him. The wind, warm and fragrant with pollen from the yellow flower fields, paused for a single breath as the sky began to crack, not with thunder, but with light long and silver and silent as the first of the ships descended. For weeks whispers had crawled through the village, that the sky would split, that warriors would walk among them again, not with fire this time, but with something harder hope. Oren had asked his grandfather if it was true. The old man had only nodded and said, "Hope and fear wear the same face until they speak." So Oren waited, clutching his hand-carved wooden bird, carved from the branches of the very tree his father had planted before vanishing in the war. He'd never seen real soldiers before, only heard stories the kind whispered by oil lamps, told by scarred men who flinched at their own shadows. But these ships, they didn't roar, they glided. They hummed like lullabies made of steel and memory. The villagers gathered on the hill, watching the dark dots grow larger, casting long shadows that crawled gently across the wildflowers. No one ran, no one screamed. A woman in red knelt and touched the soil. A child beside her traced the shadow of a ship with his fingers. As the first landing ramp hissed open, releasing a soft puff of sterilized air, the silence broke not with noise but with breath. Oren stepped forward, past the elders, past the quiet watchers toward the ship. The tall figure that descended wore no armor, only dark gray cloth and a soft insignia of peace on the chest plate. It was Captain Sierra, though Oren did not know her name. She knelt before him, not as conqueror but as equal. She did not speak first. Oren, clutching his bird, whispered, "Are you here to take or to give?" Sarah reached into her pocket and held out a single seed. "To begin," she said. The villagers watched as Oren took the seed. Around them, soldiers disembarked. Not in lines, but in slow circles, walking with the reverence of pilgrims. Someone wept. Someone laughed. Someone fell to their knees, overwhelmed. Oren turned to the crowd and held the seed high. "They didn't come to end us," he said. "They came to remember us." And in that moment, the sky wasn't broken. It had opened. And the earth, for the first time in a generation, exhaled. The Garden of Ghosts. It began with an old shovel and a patch of stubborn soil behind the ruins of what once was Ilaria's central observatory. The war had spared no place, not even the stars. Arik, former soldier of the 9th Division and bearer of 3 medals he never wore, dug in silence. His hands, once designed to crush, now pressed gently into earth softened by spring rain. Around him, tall grass swayed like old memories. The garden hadn't started with vision, it had started with grief. A need to put hands to something that wouldn't bleed when touched. His first seed was a mistake. Dropped in the dirt when his ration pack tore open, and a cracked nut slipped through. Weeks later, a small sprout appeared, stubborn and green. He didn't know what it was. He only knew it was alive. That was enough. Now, 5 years after the landing, Arik tended to his ghosts every morning. Not because he feared them, but because he missed them. Each flower bed was a name. Each vine a conversation. A place where death turned into color. Ilaria had given back more than he ever thought it would. Children from the Valley School often visited now. They came not to hear war stories, but to learn how to prune, how to water without drowning, how to speak kindly to life even when it had once betrayed you. Arik showed them gently. His face still carried the sharp angles of a warrior, but his voice had learned softness again. One morning, a child named Nara asked why one patch remained empty. "That's where I buried the part of me I didn't want to bring back," he said. She blinked, confused. He knelt beside her, planting a bluebell. "Some things we let go so the rest can bloom." She nodded as if she understood more than he'd meant. That night, Arik lit a lantern by the willow tree and wrote a letter to someone long gone. He did this often, not to send, but to release. "Today they laughed," he wrote. "I think that's what forgiveness sounds like now." And above the garden, the stars he once fought under blinked slowly, watching peace take root where blood once fell. After peace, what remains? Years passed. Ilaria healed in ways no map could measure. Rivers redrawn by time, forests reclaiming craters, laughter echoing through streets built where bunkers once stood. Children born in peace didn't ask what war felt like. They asked how tall a sunflower could grow. Captain Sarah, now simply Sarah, lived in a cottage carved into a hill that once held a command station. She tended bees, wrote poems no one read, carried the seed pouch still, though all had been planted. One morning, walking through the meadow, she found a stone with names, etched shallowly names of those who had never left orbit, those who had become part of the stars. She knelt and ran her fingers across them, whispering each name. Not a roll call, a prayer, a memory, and then a smile. Not for death, but for the lives they'd made possible. In the town square, elders spoke not of strategy, but of stories, of when the sky fell silent and the world woke up. Arik's garden had grown into a sanctuary. Birds nested in helmet shells, now used as pots. Vines crawled over rusted guns turned into trellises. Oren, now grown, taught children to plant with open hands. Nara painted murals of ships that looked like feathers, and warriors who smiled with seed pouches on their belts. And Sarah, sitting beneath the old willow one evening, heard them sing a song she didn't recognize, soft, low, full of light. Not a war hymn, a beginning. And she closed her eyes, and she breathed, and Ilaria bloomed.